Have you ever wondered, why are jeans blue? I have, and for the past few weeks I haven't been able to get the question out of my head. I mean, who decided that jeans need to be blue? And it doesn't stop with denim. Why is workwear in general so often blue? I mean, think about it. We say blue collar, French workers wear the bleu de travail, German laborers wear the Blaumann. And here's the thing, none of those are denim and none of those are dyed with indigo. So they have nothing in common with jeans. But all of these very different garments are still very blue. So clearly there's some deep-rooted connection between the color blue and the working class. But here's the plot twist. Blue used to be a very expensive color. For centuries it was a luxury, worn by royals and reserved for the rich, and even nicknamed blue gold because of how expensive it was. So how did we get from that to blue being the standard color for tough and hard-wearing workwear? I mean, yes, there are some advantages, like blue helps to hide stains, but so do black and brown. So why would anyone use blue gold for hard labor clothing? Well, over the last few weeks I went down a serious rabbit hole trying to make sense of it all. And well, while there's no single definitive answer, there is an interesting story to discover, a fascinating mix of economics, culture, symbolism and chemistry. So join me in on this deep dive on the history of denim, dye and how the color blue became a symbol of work, labor and everyday wear. If you know parts of the story, I also included timestamps. Let's start this rabbit hole by looking at jeans, because they are the most prominent piece of workwear, and then shimmy along. Now, quick terminology check. The term jeans refers to the pants. Denim is the fabric that the pants are made of. But what is denim exactly? Denim is a type of twill weave, one of the three basic types of weaves in textiles. In a twill weave you have horizontal threads, called weft, that pass under two or more vertical threads, called warp, in a repeating diagonal pattern. This gives twill its signature ribbed texture. Now the special thing about denim is that the warp threads are dyed indigo blue and the weft threads are left white. That's why your jeans are blue on the outside and white on the inside. So now that we have the basics down, let's talk about origins. The names themselves give us a hint about the creation of the garments, and there are two main myths. One indication is the term denim. It is believed to come from the term serge denim, a fabric from the French town Nimes. Nimes was a major center of cloth manufacture and produced from the end of the Middle Ages its own cheap everyday cloth called serge. Their cloth was dyed blue with indigo and initially was made out of wool, but over time they also added cotton, silk waste and hemp, and eventually serge denim evolved into denim. Another story of origin comes from the term jeans, which is from the Italian city of Gênes, the French name for Genoa. In early Islamic times, a fabric called fustian from a city of Fustat near Cairo was exported to Italy. So in medieval Genoa, local weavers created their own tough cotton version, a deep blue cloth ideal for sailors and dock workers. And this cloth was exported under the name of bleu de Gênes. And thanks to an unknown Italian painter, we know that by the 1650s, common and poor people were already wearing jeans, or at least a very similar garment. So there are these two stories regarding the origin of the jeans. But regardless of which one is true, it shows us that denim and jeans were already blue in those times, in the 1600s. There was already a certain custom or practice of dyeing work clothes blue, and this was already available to common people and the working class. But that just brings back the big question. Why blue? And wasn't blue only reserved for royals and the rich? And to understand this, we need to understand indigo. First off, indigo is a natural dye that has been used for thousands of years all over the world. Which is funny because the name indigo is quite misleading. You see, the word indigo comes from Latin indicum, which means substance from India. And it's true that the Indigofera tinctoria plant is native to the Indian subcontinent, which was one of the most important historical sources. But plants that produce indigo can be found all over the world. For example, in Europe, people had woad. In Latin America, there's a plant called anil. And in Africa and Asia, various types of indigofera were present. So dyeing stuff blue was not something that only existed in India, or only existed because of the export of indigo from India. The process of dyeing stuff blue using indigo was something that was discovered at many different time points in many different places all over the world. Although it should be mentioned that the Indian plants have a much higher yield for indigo and produce much more higher quality dyes than, for example, European woad. This is, by the way, also the reason why many European countries banned the import of indigo for a while, to protect their own domestic economy. By the way, if you like those kind of stories about fashion history and why things are the way they are, please subscribe. It helps a lot, and especially for small YouTubers like myself, it has a massive impact. If not, that's fine. Let's get back to the story. The point that I'm trying to make is that dyeing stuff blue was a global phenomenon, independently discovered in many different regions. That has a lot to do with how indigo dyeing works, a process that is both seemingly easy, but also deceptively complicated and magical and borders on alchemy. Quick chemistry class to understand this. There are two major steps for dyeing with indigo. First, you have dissolved indigo, which is not water soluble, in a warm alkaline solution, creating what's called a vat. This reduces the indigo into a soluble yellow-green liquid, sometimes called indigo-white. When the fabric is dipped and pulled out, it's yellowish at first, but exposure to air oxidizes it back into the insoluble blue form, and that blue bonds to the outside of the fiber. Here's also what's wild. Indigo doesn't need a mordant. That's a chemical fixation that is needed in most dyeing processes. Indigo just sticks on its own, and it works on pretty much any natural fiber, animal or plant-based, which can't be said about other kinds of dyes. Now, although this dyeing process seems very complicated on first sight, in reality, common country people could just gather plant material from the surrounding countryside, boil it up with some wool, urine, yes, and some ashes, and on a domestic level, achieve a simple blue dyed fabric. Maybe not the best quality, but it worked. But if you wanted high quality results, that took skill and a specialized craftsman. Indigo behaves in mysterious ways.
働かせすぎで若い時に無理させると、本当に人間と一緒なんで、はい、多少はまあ厳しく、でも厳しすぎないように愛情込めて育ててあげると長い期間綺麗な色出してくれるっていう感じになります。
And expert dyers often guarded their methods like sacred secrets. This is a big reason why indigo became a special and often expensive dye, surrounded with many myths, superstitions, and religious rituals that evolved over centuries. And honestly, can you blame them? Imagine how mind-boggling it must have been to see blue, a color that is so rare in nature, emerge from like a yellow soup. It's basically alchemy. I mean, think about it. In nature, most colors are earthy. Reds, browns, ochres. Even ancient cave paintings were limited to those. And the rareness of blue dyes compared to, for example, yellow is echoed in the vegetable kingdom. Blue flowers are so much less common than, for example, yellow ones. And edible blue substances are basically non-existent. So only with the exception of some poisonous frogs, mostly only the sky and the sea are blue. So how completely mind-boggling must it have been for the first people to discover blue dyes? Especially when the blue color is made with a process that looks like alchemy or magic, it makes total sense that it became sacred, luxurious and powerful. And this is interesting because indigo, next to becoming a luxury good, also received a lot of symbolic meaning. Over time, it gained immense cultural significance in many different cultures. Like indigo-dyed textiles are heavily in use in ceremonial and ritual contexts. For example, the association of indigo with death is really big. So some Indonesian cultures have worn indigo-dyed textiles to mark stages in the agricultural life cycle, which parallels the human progression in life. For others, the color blue is also connected with protection and health, like indigo-dyed turbans should relieve headaches, and farming communities in Asia believe that indigo-dyed clothing would repel snakes and insects. Another example, in Java and Bali, indigo-dyed clothing is often used for ceremonies in times of crisis, for exorcism rituals, but also for weddings. And because of its potency, some of the clothing is reserved for only royal use. But back to the initial question, how did indigo blue become the color of the working class? And not only the color of royalty and the riches. So you see, indigo-dyed clothing was a symbol for wealth, and this popularity of the color blue led to a surge in the farming for indigo plants. India was already a major exporter in ancient times, but with the opening of the sea route in the 15th century, the trade only expanded. And indigo became so profitable, it was dubbed the blue gold. So naturally, colonial powers started to cultivate it across the globe, in India, Africa and the Americas, all to cash in. And that's basically the answer to the initial question. With that supply explosion, indigo became affordable for the common people. So the double attraction of indigo as a clothing dye has always been its practicality, because it hides stains, but also its widespread availability. And that's likely how working class people in Nimes and Genoa had access to indigo-dyed clothing. This also explains why American brands like Levi's were able to use local indigo-dyed fabrics to produce denim overalls. You probably know the story. German immigrant goes to the US, opens up a dry goods store. He teams up with a tailor and they sell overalls and pants made from a local twill that is dyed with indigo. And the rest is history. And together with jeans, a new ritual surrounding indigo-dyed clothing was established that traveled all around the world. One American writer in this book remembers his teenage years in post-war America and the discussions of high school kids about the coolest way to shrink and fade new blue jeans, when the best way was to bury a pair of jeans in a horsetail patch for a month. And he realized that the whole sanding and hosing down, bleaching and grating and scaling was also a form of adornment in itself, as ritualized as the cutting of tribal scars, as strict and exact as the magic of painting one's body for war. And I actually really like the comparison. And of course, scratching up jeans is not the same as body modifications like tribal tattoos. But the act of distressing jeans is a kind of modern ritual of identity. And this is something that could be found all over the world, that traveled even to the Soviet Union. Now, although jeans have been popularized all around the world, they are not the only reason that we connotate the color blue with the working class. From the 18th century, much of the indigo that was produced in America and the Indies was used to dye uniforms for armies, navies, postal workers, hospital staff. All of these new uniforms, together with the jeans, solidified the picture of blue being the color of the working people. So when the industrialization hit in full force and the demand for work-specific clothes grew, blue was one of the better choices. On one hand, of course, blue hides stains amazingly. On the other hand, the popularity of indigo blue not only led to an increase in supply of natural indigo, it also led to an arms race in developing synthetic indigo and other synthetic blue dyes like Prussian blue or Berlin blue. And that's how we got the French bleu de travail and the German Blaumann. Both are not made of denim and also not indigo-dyed, but they were still dyed blue with the new synthetic dyes simply because it was available and cheap. But still, one question remains. While we're back in the day, work were rarely brown or black. At least this one has a logical answer. Early browns and blacks were made from iron and tannin, and these damaged the fibers of the fabric. And while indigo doesn't really reinforce the fibers of the fabric, it certainly does not damage them. So there is, or was at least, a little bit of functionality to it. So to sum this up, what is the final answer of why are jeans blue? There is not one specific answer to the question, but we see a certain development to the question over human history. So first, blue was always a fascinating color because it was so rare in nature, and it therefore became very popular for ceremonial and ritual use, and it also became a symbol of wealth. So over time, a whole industry evolved around this expensive dye, and through improvement of the cultivation and the dyeing process, it became cheaper and available to the masses, to a point where already in the 1600s, common people could afford to wear jeans. And from this point, the color blue became the preferred color for work clothes, simply because it was available and not crazily expensive. And the whole dyeing process got even cheaper with the invention of synthetic indigo, which led to a stronger connotation of uniforms and the color, like with navy uniforms or postman uniforms. So after the invention of more synthetic dyes that are not indigo, it was very natural to step into the footsteps of indigo and just continue making work clothes blue. And this is not only why jeans are blue, but also why we think of blue being the color of the working class. Well, this video was really tough one to research and to make, and it really took ages. So if you liked it, please subscribe. Also try asking your parents if distressing denim was a big thing for them. They probably have some cool stories about that to tell. And if they do, please share them in the comments. I'm really curious. Also, if you like this video, here's another one for you to check out. Take care.